It's hard to move on from that main event at UFC 303, but we're going to fight through it here. We will now get into the rest of International Fight Week 2024, touch on some of the big victories, big performances, and everything in between. And it starts in the co-main event because while the main event had its drama leading into the fight week, my goodness, this co-main event had drama leading into during the fights themselves. As I did in the preview episode, we are going to break down the lineage of not a division, not of a championship, not of just the UFC history in general. No, we're going to break down the lineage of the UFC 303 co-main event because we originally were supposed to get Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree. Then Khalil Roundtree gets suspended due to a banned substance. In steps Carlos Alberg. So then we had Alberg versus Hill. Then Jamal Hill suffers a knee injury. In steps Anthony Smith. We now have Anthony Smith versus Carlos Alberg. In steps Roman Dolidze, the number 10 ranked middleweight in the world. Alberg goes down with an injury. We have Smith. We have Alberg. Oh, and by the way, it's no longer the co-main event. It's now a featured bout. And so the new co-main event is Diego Lopes versus Brian T-City Ortega. All is well. A little bit of drama as we head into weigh-ins on Friday. Brian Ortega was planning to move to lightweight in September. He was cutting to 145 on short notice to save this fight, or not save the fight, but save the card with this fight with Diego Lopes. He could no longer make the weight. They stop it in the middle of Thursday night. They move the bout to a lightweight 155-pound fight. Diego Lopes and Brian Ortega both make weight. They square off with one another at ceremonial weigh-ins. Everything is all gravy, baby. No, it was not, because as we learn during the prelims of UFC 303, Brian Ortega, 103-degree fever, he falls ill, he cannot compete. In steps on 4 hours' notice, the number 13 ranked featherweight in the world, Dan 50K Ige, who conveniently enough happens to live and train in Las Vegas, Nevada. He messages Hunter Campbell. He asks to come save the day, to become a legend. The UFC obliges. All of his medicals and testing and everything that goes on behind the scenes was already on record because he fought in Las Vegas in February. All he had to do was show up, make the weight, and bada bing, bada boom, we get Diego Lopes, the number 14 ranked featherweight, versus Dan Ige, the number 13 ranked featherweight. Remind you, featherweight is a 145-pound weight class. They do a catch weight bout of 165 pounds. They weigh in the back. Diego Lopes, 161 pounds. Dan Ige, I'm going a lot here, a mile a minute, weighs in at 164.5 pounds. Boom, the new co-main event for UFC 303 is set. Diego Lopes versus Dan Ige. These two absolute warriors. I hope they got an unfathomable amount of money to save this fight card on the day of, not even the day of, on the night as the card is taking place. Unbelievable, unprecedented. And so what do we get? We get a back and forth fight for 15 straight minutes where Diego Lopes gets the unanimous decision victory, 29-28 across the board. Yes, Dan Ige not only went 15 minutes on 4 hours notice with a top level featherweight, he won the third round, not the first round, not the second round, the third round when you're supposed to dig deep and be tired and be dragging through just to make it to the scorecards. Dan Ige had his best moments, had Lopes on the back foot, hurt up against the cage. Lopes secured a huge, huge moment where he was able to not pull guard, but he went to his back, I'll just say. Dan Ige chose to go down and finish the fight there rather than stand the fight up. But I'm not hating on nobody. I'm not critiquing nobody. This fight was unbelievable considering everything that went into it. For Dan Ige to even be remotely competitive given the circumstances is actually insane. Something that we have never seen before and more than likely will never see again. My hat is off to Diego Lopes. My hat is off to Dan Ige. Two absolute studs, two absolute warriors that embody what mixed martial arts is all about. They both want to fight in the Sphere in September for Noche UFC. Dana and the boys, give these two what they want. Give them big fights in the Sphere. Now, what could those big fights be? I would say Diego Lopes taking on maybe Brian Ortega, the originally scheduled fight here. I'm also understanding if that's not the route that the UFC wants to go because Ortega has his eyes set on 155 anyways, but I wouldn't be opposed if they try and get that one together one last time. If not, who can Diego fight? He can fight someone like Yair Rodriguez, someone with Mexican blood running through their veins to fight on the Mexican Independence Day card. Diego Lopes is a coach and helps train with Alexa Grasso. I'm sure he may even help coach slash train Yair. I'm sure if they don't train or coach with one another, they definitely have had their run-ins with one another in the past. I think there's amazing storylines to be had there and an absolutely incredible fight. Aaron Bronstetter originally brought that idea to fruition with Yair and Diego Lopes, and I don't disagree. If you want to just look through the division, there are plenty of other fighters that Diego could fight that are ranked above him, but a lot of them are booked and busy right now. We have the champion Ilya versus Max Holloway, more than likely going to happen. We have Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze, most likely going to happen. He's already fought Movsar Evloev. So, I mean, maybe someone like Aljamain Sterling, maybe Alexander Volkanovski, any big names like that that are former champions, Diego Lopes absolutely has earned the right to face those types of fighters. And Dan Ige, give the guy someone in the top 10. He just came in on short notice and had a back and forth banger with Diego Lopes. I cannot just give enough support and respect to these two guys. Truly, history was absolutely made. Macy Chiasson got the biggest victory of her UFC career with a TKO doctor stoppage in the second round against former title challenger Mayra Bueno Silva. Macy Chiasson has now won back-to-back fights, both via finish, in 3 of her last 4. The only loss to another former title challenger, Irene Aldana, and that was in September of 2022. So Chiasson, a submission win in March over Pani Kianzad, and here a nasty TKO victory. The first round was all Mayra Bueno Silva until like the last minute or so. Then the tide began to turn. It looked like she was already getting a little bit exhausted. Macy weathered some big storms, some big shots to the body, some knees to the face, and she came on strong. Didn't necessarily win that first round, in my opinion, but made me feel comfortable enough to live bet Macy at plus 250 in between rounds. She was even higher than that, but I didn't take the bait quick enough, and she poured it on in that second round, got Mayra down to the ground, sliced her with a nasty elbow, and oh my goodness, the cut on Mayra Bueno Silva's eyebrow was disgusting. The blood was dripping right into her vision. They had no choice but to stop this fight. Big time victory for Macy Chiasson, a former contender on The Ultimate Fighter at 32 years old, a 10-3 record with 6 finishes. She's right there now for a title contention, maybe even a title shot in this division. I think kind of the way to play the rest of the year for 2024 is probably Raquel Pennington versus Juliana Pena, because it seems that Juliana, once back from injury, is eyeing her crack at the title. And while they do that, why not do Macy Chiasson versus Kayla Harrison as a number 1 contender fight? Come on, UFC. Keep chugging along, man. Keep building this division because it has been in a bad spot for years now at this point. Macy Chiasson, Kayla Harrison, number 1 contender fight toward the end of the year. Pair that with a title fight between Raquel Pennington and Juliana Pena. Bada bing, bada boom. I feel like I have to talk about this fight. I feel like I'm obligated to at least mention it because it was so highly anticipated heading into fight night. Ian Machado Garry remains perfect. He is now 15-0 in his professional MMA career at just the young age of 27. I believe 7 or 8-0 in the UFC, numerous ranked opponent victories now. And this was not the fight that I was expecting because we have two very high level strikers, very technical, powerful when they decide to be type of strikers that are just really levels above a lot of the other striker specific fighters at 170 pounds right now, presently in the division. And what we got instead was Ian Garry implementing a grappling game plan, I guess you would say, which in hindsight isn't that crazy because MVP is a super high caliber striker, the best striker that Ian Garry would have ever faced so far in his career. Ian actually not only got Michael Page down in round one, but nearly had him submitted. He had him locked into a rear naked choke for quite a long time. To MVP's credit, he fought out of it, was able to make it to the stool and get to the second round. In the second round, Michael Venom Page looked fantastic. I just want to say that throughout this 15 minutes, when the fight was on the feet, Ian Garry did second to nothing. And Michael Page absolutely controlled this fight on the feet. It wasn't even competitive in the stand-up realm. Now, I'm not saying Michael Page boxed Ian Garry's head off and beat him from pillar to post, but he landed the much cleaner shots, the much more high volume number of strikes when it was on the feet. I thought he looked incredible, and for that reason alone, it was 1-1 going into the third and final round. And what do we get? Michael Page getting the best of the exchanges on the feet. Then he actually gets Ian Garry down to the ground with top control for I'd say a minute to a minute and a half. He then lets Ian Garry up. Ian Garry presses Michael up against the fence, takes his back, and for 1 minute and 44 seconds, Ian Garry, while Michael Page is standing up, hunched over, Ian is on his back, not locking in submissions, not really landing a lot of strikes, besides some little pitter-patter shots here and there, working his arm, but never had anything locked in. But that minute and 44 seconds was enough for the judges to give him that third and final round. I'm not going to say it was a robbery, but I look at that third round as the two grappling exchanges between Page and Garry were pretty similar. Yes, you could say Garry had the better, more dominant position because he had Michael's back, but he didn't do anything with it. Michael Page had Ian Garry in full guard, and when the fight was just for a couple of moments in that third round on the feet, Michael Page did determine those sequences, did win those exchanges. I think there's a case for MVP to be the winner of this fight, but I'm not gung-ho robbery either that Ian Garry was the rightful winner as well. But honestly, his stock did not rise. He quite literally in the post-fight presser in the cage, there was like crickets in the arena. There weren't boos coming in like there were all throughout fight week and ceremonial weigh-ins, but there weren't cheers either. Very, very weird feeling in that arena after this victory. Machado Garry, undefeated. He is definitely a high-level mixed martial artist. I'm not taking that away from him, but I'm still not seeing championship potential, and dare I say, not even title contender potential right now. That can all change. He can have another fight. I would say if he, depending on who his next matchup is, one more win puts him legitimately into title contention if we're talking just rankings alone, not necessarily his skill set or what he shows in the cage. And there's a guy that said his name on social media, Shavkat Rakhmonov. Apparently they've trained together in the past. Ian Garry wants that fight, which kudos to him because not a lot of people want to fight Shavkat Rakhmonov. Give these two guys what they want. Jack Della originally wanted to face Shavkat. JDM is now hurt. Give me Ian Garry. Give me Shavkat Rakhmonov by the end of the year. Winner of that probably gets the winner of Leon Edwards and Bilal Muhammad. Joe Pyfer bounced back in a big way with a nasty knockout over Marc-Andre Barriault just 1 minute and 25 seconds into the very first round of the fight. Joe Pyfer is now 4-1 in the UFC since debuting back in September of 2022. All 4 victories are by finish, 3 of those in the first round. The only loss was to a top 15 ranked middleweight, Jack Hermanson in a main event back in February. And I felt like that was a little bit too much too soon for Joe Pyfer, to be quite honest with you. I know Dana White loves the guy. B. Joe Pyfer was the moniker around the 2022 season of Dana White's Contender Series. So I understand they wanted to get behind the hype of him, give him a big opportunity against a seasoned vet like Hermanson. Hermanson dominated that fight throughout the 25 minutes that we got to see it. Not like beating Joe Pyfer badly, but he convincingly won in a very, very sensible fashion. It was a very good performance from Jack Hermanson. And again, I just felt like it was a little bit too much too soon for Pyfer. This was the type of fight that he needed, I believe, and that is why he got such an insane, brutal one-punch shot knockout over Barriault. 4-1 in this middleweight division. I know it's not super stacked. It's not super deep. Maybe they give him a crack into the back half of the top 15 with his next matchup. Chris Curtis is currently in that 15 ranked spot. I think that's actually a pretty sick fight. Joe Pyfer, Chris Curtis, sign me up. Jean Silva became the first person to ever knock out Charles Jourdain, and he did it in brutal fashion. 1 minute and 22 seconds into the second round, he flatlined Charles Jourdain. Silva unfortunately missed weight heading into this fight, which is definitely a red flag, if you will, because he fights out of the Fighting Nerds training camp in Brazil. He's 13-2, 12 finishes, 27 years old, a Contender Series alum, 2-0 in the UFC with 2 finishes. He knocked out Weston Wilson in January in his debut. The hype is there behind this man. The finishes, the excitement is there. His camp with guys such as Caio Bahaio. This guy is a good prospect. Got to make the weight. It's only a second UFC fight. Let's not make a habit out of this if you're Silva. Capitalize on still getting a big victory. Put the weight miss behind you. Bounce back strong to cap off 2024. Maybe get a 3-0 year to have some momentum riding into 2025. Jean Silva still, weight miss aside, big time knockout, big time performance. Let's just polish that game up with the outside antics, because in the cage, the dude is dangerous. 25 years old, 9 victories, 0 defeats. 8 of his 9 victories are by finish. He's now 3-0 in the UFC. He's a Dana White Contender Series alum from 2023, 2-0 already in 2024. This guy is unbelievable. Say what you will, obviously it's still entry-level competition that he is facing. He submitted Nick Aguirre in his UFC debut. He knocked out Cameron Simon in just his second UFC fight. That actually is a pretty big fight for just your second UFC bout. And then at UFC 303, he knocks out Yanis Ghemmouri, who lost in September of 2023 to William Gomez in Paris. So competition, hey, he just came into the UFC in 2023. It's not like there could be worse fighters that he's facing. These are all still UFC caliber fighters, right? Let's put it that way. And he's making it look easy, and none made easier than a 19-second first round knockout at UFC 303. Payton Talbott, a very unique personality, cool, calm, and collected with his demeanor. The UFC has something here with Payton Talbott, and I think after last night, they definitely recognize that. Gillian Robertson got the biggest win of her UFC career last night at UFC 303. She is now 14-8. She still has 11 finishes to her name out of those 14 victories. And this was a one-sided beatdown over Michelle Waterson-Gomez, a former highly ranked strawweight in this division. Gillian is now 3-1 since moving down to 115 pounds. Victories over Pierre Rodriguez, a submission. Victories over Poliana Viana, a TKO. And now a dominant decision victory over a top 15, ranked number 14, actually, Michelle Waterson-Gomez. The only loss at 115 pounds for Gillian is against the number 11 ranked Tabitha Ricci in a very good fight that went the full 15 minutes. Gillian absolutely belongs in this weight class. I'm happy to see her thriving thus far. She needs to launch into the top 10 next. Let's take a look here. Like I said, she fought the number 11 ranked Ricci. Who could she fight? She could fight someone like a Luana Pinheiro that's lost 2 straight fights. She's currently at number 12. Maybe she takes on Lupi Godinez, Angela Hill. Any mixture of those 3 women, I think, are fantastic matchups for Gillian to have next. in her run. And I do just want to tip my hat to Michelle Waterson-Gomez, a 9-year veteran in the UFC that has been in there with some of the best to ever do it in the 115-pound weight class. She called it a career and retired at UFC 303. She always came to scrap. She's an amazing personality, a mother, and it was just fun, had her dances on stage, always smiling, and really brought it. She was in some very, very good fights throughout her UFC career, always went out on her shield. My hat is off to her. She called it a career. The karate hottie, Michelle Waterson-Gomez. So be sure to give me all of your thoughts on UFC 303 from top to bottom. Just an absolutely wild card, unprecedented stuff that we've never really seen before. I feel like the closest thing to it in terms of craziness, getting to the actual event itself would have been, was it UFC 278 or 279? I think it was UFC 279. The whole Nate Diaz, Khamzat Chimaev, Tony Ferguson, Daniel Rodriguez, Li Jingliang, Kevin Holland, that big mixture of drama, that is definitely up there for sure as well. UFC 303 is one that we will be talking about for a long time in this MMA community, so I would love to hear all of your thoughts on everything surrounding this card. If you enjoyed this recap, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new so you never miss my recaps of the most meaningful results every single week. I also break down the biggest and best storylines heading into every card and give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. Be sure to join the community on social media at the BAJ MMA and follow the show on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify, Apple, and more. Podcast episodes release on those every Friday and Monday. Have a great week, and I will see you in the next video.